Hello and welcome to this Oda episode of the Eternal Lore. On the last Oda episode we saw a frantic defense of Kaga province where the enemy was sending swarms of ninjas at us, but we used sacrifices and clever use of archers to take them down. Then in defense of Owari province we attempted to attack the Uesugi, however Nobuhide and Nobunaga were ambushed by a superior force. However, the Oda men proved their veterancy by easily eliminating all the Uesugi had to offer, and then taking up a nice strong formation to beat off all the further attackers they had for us, leading to a complete Uesugi defeat. And those forces went on to destroy all of the Uesugi forces in Owari, securing the area. But of course there were more attacks to come, and we defeated many Chosakabe and Tokugawa armies to clear out Owari even further. And then we just saw that we're beginning to suffer a food shortage. Let's see how that continues. Dear disgraced clan lords, my good Shogun wishes to remind you of how he hates you, and how interacting with you has been as pleasant as getting one's wet buttock stuck to an icy privy. Thus he has instead commanded me to inform you that you are all the greatest of history's many fools for trying to attack Owari. He goes on to add that the Oda are like insects who will be harmless once their wings have been pulled off. Thusly, he instructs that you muster a scrap of competence and attack the Oda borders instead. And so, with a sudden increase in microphone quality, we return to the Oda campaign. You can see the situation is that there's a Chosakabe army hanging around in the middle of Owari. It's suffering from winter attrition, but still it's going to be in our interest to get rid of them now, because you can see we actually have tons of local forces. We've been defending Owari for so long. We've built up a very large defensive force here, filled with experienced generals and veteran troops. Now I wanted to get the forces inside the castle led by Takayama to come out and attack the enemy, but they've actually been sabotaged by a Chosakabe ninja it seems, so they can't move. So instead, I moved Nobuhide up to displace the enemy army. The Chosakabe retreat from battle and get stuck on the river between Owari and Mino, so they're still relatively close, so it looks like we can still go after them, but Nobuhide's force at the very least doesn't have enough movement points to actually get involved, so he's going to have to be left behind, so we are going to be at a tiny bit of a disadvantage not to have his veteran troops around, but still, the enemy have got so close to the castle that Takayama's troops inside will actually take part in this battle despite being sabotaged. So I move into the attack, Nobunaga leading the assault, and it looks like we have a small advantage on the balance bar, not a massive advantage. It would have actually been in my interest to fight this battle on the battlefield to make sure I didn't take too many casualties, but I decided to just let them auto-resolve it anyway because I thought I would win, and I just kind of wanted to get rid of this Chosakabe army and focus on the future of Oda rather than dealing with another boring invasion. So we do win the battle. Nobuyuki levels up. Good news, the entire Chosakabe army is destroyed. However, we did take 1,000 casualties to defeat only 1,500 enemies. So overall, it wasn't the greatest of battles, but things are okay. Our troops will recover quickly. And Owari is safe for now, so excellent news. So if you discount the enemy agents hanging around, Owari is actually pretty much secured completely at the moment. So I'm going to move all of these forces I have around here to just get near the castle in case any new enemy armies show up, which is almost inevitable given that it happens pretty much every turn. With that secure, it's now even more safe for me to move Toyotomi's forces away from the Owari-Mino area to come and support Kiyonori. You can see Kiyonori is sitting in the forest recovering troops whilst laying ambushes on the road between North Shinano and South Shinano. I'm moving extra troops up from South Shinano to support them, because now this gathering force here might just have enough strength to push north towards North Shinano and take it back from the Yamanouchi. As I move up, I see there is a Yamanouchi main force just standing on the crossroads there. Perhaps they were intending to come down towards South Shinano in the next turn. So I thought my best bet for now is to lay ambushes right on the border and see if the enemy come for me. So now we're ending the turn. It's actually the Uesugi who show up on the North Shinano-South Shinano border. They spot my forces and decide they're not going to attack. A wise move, so no ambush was triggered, but at least we've stopped the Uesugi sneaking into our territory. The Hattori are back, moving towards Umi. Also, the Amako attack Umi with an army, but they don't assault the castle, they lay siege, which can only mean one thing, which is that they intend to bring up reinforcements for the siege. So I need to go and reinforce the castle as soon as I can, because there's probably another stack of Amako men on its way towards Umi province. This of course means abandoning Owari to some extent, but it does seem it's getting safer to do so. The Tokugawa haven't attacked in a while and we've defeated them many times, so perhaps they've just stopped attacking Owari. And we've defeated so many Chosokabe landing forces, I doubt they're going to land another force in the near future. So I'm just arranging my forces to get a bunch of men over towards Umi. I'm going to attack the Hattori army first, which just stops just short of the castle. Looks like it ran out of movement points to actually come and besiege the castle. Nobuhide leading the assault, and as I came in I had a massive force advantage. It looks like this Hattori army is both under strength and all of its men aren't actually particularly experienced, so they're going to go down easily. The auto resolve gives us a very nice result, and we've dispatched that Hattori army without even having to think about it. The Hattori are doing very badly in this war. They keep getting absolutely annihilated by Oda forces. Anyway, so now I have just enough movement points to get in near the castle and try and support them in any future attacks. I'm also going to try and get rid of that annoying Chosokabe ninja that was hanging around, because he actually keeps sabotaging the forces inside Owari Castle every turn, which means I can't move them out. And at the moment I don't need them to be there, so it's actually quite annoying. That was my ninja there going in. He manages to wound the enemy's ninja, not killing him, but at least he'll be gone for a few turns as a result. Now we can see the Hategiyama have a strong presence down there in Iga, so it seems likely they're going to come up and possibly support the Amiko in their assault. But regardless of what happens, I've put all the men I can in the area, so whatever happens at Umi, at least I know I'm as strong as I can be. Now here's the situation with the Uesugi. It looks like their forces are possibly approximately equal in strength to the forces we have here, so it's not really in our advantage to attack at the moment. And of course there's not really any pressure to attack, because even if I did get past them, I can't get past the Yamanuchi, so I can't complete my objective at the moment. So now we're heading into the next end turn sequence, and it looks like the Uesugi are planning to attack. They come down and attack Kiyanori's army, but I don't think they actually knew about Toyotomi's reinforcement army, so while they thought they were going to have a big numerical superiority, actually they're going to be forced to face a fair fight to get into the Oda lands. So let's try and keep them out of South Shinano, just like we kept them out of Owari. The men are worried. Many of them knew of folks slain by the Oda during the Owari campaign. They don't realise that the enemy here was defeated recently, and are mostly just common spearmen. Surely all we'll need to do is put on a show of force and they'll be racing back south as fast as we can chase them. Destroying these men will be like removing the lid from a pot. A little effort at first, but when achieved, the spoils of what lies inside flow without halt. Oh, all this talk is making me thirst for some good sake. So here we are on the battlefield, and it looks like the Toyotomi army is coming into the battle in a rather annoying location on the south side of the map, whereas the rest of the Oda army was deploying on the west side. So now they're actually closer to the enemy than they are to the allied lines. You can see where I'm setting up the allied lines on this small hill inside a forest, a nice place to hide Kiyanori's large Ashigaru army from the enemy. Here are the enemy themselves. They have a lot of cavalry and tons of heavy samurai, not in any particular formation at the moment. I think they're still arranging, and of course they also need to wait for their own reinforcements to catch up with their army before they're going to do anything serious. The reinforcements looks like it's just another mix of samurai, even some pirates, which I'm not too worried about because we can get rid of the pirates with relative ease. So to deal with my reinforcement situation, I basically rushed Toyotomi back to the main line immediately, leaving the rest of the army to run as fast as they can to basically try and join our lines before the enemy reach either them or the main army. But whilst they're running across the map like this little Oda column is vulnerable to attack. Now, as my men actually begun to arrive at our lines, the enemy seemed to have moved forward a single unit of cavalry.
Our hidden units have been discovered.
And as we heard there, that unit of cavalry discovered the location of my army and then suddenly started running across the front of my lines. Now, I wasn't actually watching them do this because I was trying to arrange my arriving reinforcements into the formation, so I wasn't paying attention to this unit of light cavalry. And as a result, it turns out I made a big mistake because this unit of light cavalry actually catches a unit of matchdog Ashigaru, which was way behind the rest of the column and hadn't arrived yet. So, realizing this, I try to save them. I turn back a unit of Katana Samurai and a unit of Naginata Samurai, come back and fight with the enemy's horsemen whilst I try and extricate the Matchlock Ashigaru and get them back to my lines. They need to get just behind my lines, so there's a small hill where they can fly over the top of the enemy. That's what I'm trying to do, but you can see these horsemen are messing things up. A lot of my men are now sort of stuck within them and can't get out. So I'm fighting with them. The enemy are taking arrow fire as well. because they are quite close to my front lines, but the enemy are piling in more and more cavalry to this engagement, and my Katana Samurai and Naginata Samurai are actually beginning to put themselves in grave danger. They're being surrounded by these enemy light cavalry attacks, and they're actually quite far in front of my line. It's not like they can just simply move back behind my spearmen to defend themselves from these cavalry. They're out on a limb, and what's making things worse is that the enemy's main force has formed up right next to them and is just beginning its advance towards Kiyonori's army. Here's the army itself, formed up in a generic formation with spearmen in the front, loads and loads of reserve infantry at the back, and in the middle, missile infantry, a bunch of bows, and Matchlock Ashigaru, some of which are dead. I believe we lost about a third of the regiment of Matchlock Ashigaru who was attacked. Not too bad, actually. So you can see I'm trying to get my samurai who are stuck out in front of the line to rush back towards the rest of my army, but they're quite far away, and I wasn't particularly willing to move the rest of the army forwards, especially after I spent so long arranging my perfect formation. I didn't want to break it up. The other thing that was sort of stopping me from actually going to save these men is that they were actually being very useful, because they were a very useful distraction for the enemy's main advance. It was breaking up the attack just like a rock would break up a wave coming in on the shore. So it's forcing them to come in at weird angles. A lot of their men in the centre weren't actually attacking the main line, which suits me because on their flanks they were. This means I could defeat their flanks first, and then their centre would be easier to defeat later. So here you can see some Tetsubo pirates, I believe, attacking the spear lines. They'll do very badly. A Tetsubo pirate can't break through a disciplined spear wall. Here you can see I've almost actually got my men back to the line. They're just a few meters away from safety now, but still constantly being held up with the enemy's attacks. Basically I have to keep giving them move orders. They'll take about 3 steps, realise they're under attack, and then stop moving to fight the enemy. But if you keep doing it, they will gradually move, taking casualties all the way, because every time they turn to run, the enemy will kill the front line of their men. So it looks like here some of the men have finally got back. I'm rushing them right to the back of the army because they were so depleted and exhausted by that running fight that they're not going to be much use in the rest of the battle. So you can see that now they're out of the way, the entire enemy line is engaging with my front lines. I started folding around my right flank to encircle their centre, but as I did I exposed some bow Ashigaru and the enemy's cavalry attacked them again. So another poor formation decision from me. I really wasn't paying enough attention in this battle. You can see the left flank I haven't moved. I haven't moved it because the enemy has tons of reinforcements and I thought they might actually come in and attack my left flank, so I couldn't quite move them just yet. So now a little bit later, those enemy reinforcements did attack my left flank as I thought, but they attacked it in weak numbers and have been completely defeated almost immediately. You can see there's just a pile of bodies in front of my men and the rest of them just run. The enemy centre is still powerful and fighting on. I am gradually encircling it on my right flank, but they're sending in more and more men. You can see here some Yari samurai charging forward, attempting to get into the spear wall and break through it. But because they're coming uphill, it actually makes it very difficult for them to do this. My men are quite deep and very experienced as well. I believe Kiyonori's Ashigaru are level 5 and above, so they're basically samurai themselves. So the enemy are really struggling to get through and they're taking heavy losses. Here you can see a unit that I advanced out on the right flank has almost come into the centre and as a result has been surrounded by the enemy. So what I'm currently trying to do with my micromanagement is save that unit that's been surrounded. You can see my left flank is completely unengaged. I should have folded my left flank onto their centre. For the moment I was focusing on doing some heavy micromanagement of the Matchlock Ashigaru. You can also say I've managed to get some Katana Samurai to attack their archer ranks. An excellent move. This is going to absolutely destroy those archers. Behind them here are some Matchlock Ashigaru who I've moved out to the rear. I wanted to try and get some volleys into the rear of the enemy's ranks because I thought that would really demoralise them and possibly just cause them to rout even with high numbers. So the men are forming up, and you can see Matchlock Ashigaru are quite temperamental, especially if they've already fired a volley in battle. So you saw there about half of the men actually fired, the other half of the men just stood there. They're not reloading, they're not firing. I believe the game's AI isn't really optimized to actually using firearms units, unfortunately, which is a big problem. I think they're just not very good to use as offensive units. They're better on the defensive, just standing where they are and firing in simple volleys. That's when they work most effectively. But anyway, you can see that the fact I'm gradually surrounding the enemy army apparently has demoralised them because they start falling back in many places. I still haven't deployed tons of my reserve units, so the enemy could have been twice as large and I could have still fought this battle with ease. So actually, I didn't really use my army to its full potential here. Most of my units remained unengaged throughout the battle. Overall, it wasn't a very good battle in terms of my own leadership. However, it was a decisive victory still. You can see the enemy are fleeing left, right and centre. A lot of them are fleeing into my own men. Bad news, they're being assassinated. Here it looks like these heavy sword pirates are about to get hit by this deadly looking spear wall held out by these Ashigaru. Anyway, a decisive victory has been won despite the poor command skills of myself. So the Uesugi will not be getting into South Shinano, and in fact it might be possible for us to now push north with our huge number of survivors and retake North Shinano. Let's head back to the strategy map to see what's going on. 200 dead men for the sake of 2,000. Those warriors who fought before the line, standing strong against the oncoming enemy like a rock against the sea, they are true samurai. They understood the meaning of Bushido, that when you have a choice between life and death, you must choose to die, so long as your death will not be wasted. And wasted their lives were not, for they have gifted to us both victory and a chance for redemption. The way home to North Shinano lies clear. So here on the battle results screen, it looks like good news. The enemy lost around 3,000 troops and we lost only about 700. Excellent news. The regiment of Naginata samurai that was out before the line was eradicated, but the rest of the regiments look okay. So the end turn sequence continues. The Chosakabe there, landing an army in Owari for what I believe is the third time. So it looks like we're going to have to deal with another Chosakabe invasion. We lose a ninja to an enemy Metsuke, and then, as I suspected, the Amako move extra troops up to Umi and begin an assault on the castle. However, we have the grand force of Oda led by Nobuhide and Nobunaga coming to the aid of the castle. The castle itself already has a huge garrison as well, and on the balance bar we actually have a small advantage for this defense. So let's head onto the battlefield and see if we can completely eradicate these attackers. So here we see the castle itself well filled with Oda troops all around. The enemy are coming from the south and the north, mainly from the south, but also coming from the north is Nobunaga's army, slightly depleted because of the 40 regiment limit. Only around 5 or 6 of Nobunaga's regiments actually came onto the field, but still it's enough to deal with all the enemy's regiments in the area. So they came into the battle immediately. The fighting started. I'm moving my cavalry against the enemy's cavalry and just doing a general infantry charge against all of their local infantry. Over here on the east side you can see Nobuhide's army is coming in. He has 7 or 8 regiments as well, and they're going to be going straight inside the castle for the defense. The enemy's main force approaching from the south is being reinforced from behind by the enemy's second stack of troops. So it looks like the vast majority of the enemy's army is going to be attacking the south side of the castle. As a result, I'm moving all of my troops towards the south side, gradually abandoning my north side defences entirely as I realised that Nobunaga would be able to deal with all of the enemy's troops on the north side. You can see the enemy have pretty much advanced into my men without formation. I didn't really have formation either, so it's just a general brawl ensuing between troops of vaguely equal quality. A fight in which I don't have a strategic advantage, but I believe I have 1 more regiment in the area as a result of my cavalry drawing off a couple of their other regiments, so I can eventually surround them. Here you can see Long-Yard Ashigaru engaging with enemy Sword Ashigaru, a fight in which we were both simultaneously strong and weak, because our front lines will be able to stab the enemy to death, but around the flanks the enemy will have decisive advantage attacking the spear wall with their short swords. So in order to make that fight go a little bit better, you can see Nobunaga himself is getting involved. His heavy cavalry will do very well against those enemy light swordsmen. Here you can see those units that I drew off that I mentioned, my cavalry here, just pulling away a whole bunch of the enemy's heavier units. I think Naginata samurai there. Nobuhide's men, by the looks of it, are slowly coming towards the castle. They have a long way to run. They're going to be exhausted by the time they reach the battle, but at least they'll be there. They will be a meat shield for the castle itself. Nobuhide is already inside. I was going to move him up to the actual fighting point to inspire the men in a moment. You can see I've arranged a whole bunch of men on the south side of the castle ready to receive the enemy, including some matchlock Ashigaru that I'm putting to defend the gatehouse and the area to the left of it, so they will have a very nice overlook on the enemy's advance. And here is said advance, the enemy coming in not in any particular formation. In fact, they're just sending tiny groups in to begin with. So my matchlock Ashigaru try and fire at them, but because the enemy are moving fast and so spread out, they're not going to have any luck. And actually the enemies of Katana Samurai choose the perfect point to attack. They attack the Naginata Ashigaru point of the line, which they'll do very well against. So things aren't going immediately as well as I'd hoped. I'm charging more men out to act as a buffer on the outer tier. I'm using my usual strategy of just buffering the tiers with men to allow the ranged units behind them to try and take out the enemies. Pretty much a strategy of using sacrifices, to put it bluntly. And the enemy are gradually piling in more and more men now. They're starting to surround my little buffer line. My buffer line doesn't advance around the entire tier out here, so the enemy can get around the back of it if they really want to, or they can just attack the second tier without attacking my main line at all. Nobuhide's troops, by the looks of things, are now inside the castle and are moving in, so soon they'll be in the battle. Nobunaga's battle is almost over. He's surrounded the last remaining enemy units and is about to eradicate them. It looks like it's Naginata Samurai fighting with Katana Samurai, a fight that would go in my advantage normally, but things are going to be even more in my advantage because these long Yareshigaru are coming in to eradicate the rest of the enemies. So now, pretty much all of the enemy's main force is attacking the south side, as we all thought they would. My men are starting to thin out by the looks of things, especially here in the middle. Those Yari Ashigaru are almost gone. The enemy have finally outflanked my little line there and are coming up to the second tier, where I only have some Bo Ashigaru defending against them. But I'm pushing in some Katana Samurai, I believe 2 units of Katana Samurai, to defend the walls. And because the enemy was mostly attacking this section with Yari Samurai, I'm going to have a nice advantage there. So I didn't expect the enemy to actually be able to get up here. It'll be well, it's in my advantage actually for them to try and get up, because those Yari Samurai will just be coming into a meat grinder where they'll be inevitably killed. So outside you can see this huge clump of enemy troops pushing in against my men. They're not going to last all that long. You can see I'm actually moving my archers back from the wall there, because the enemy are beginning their assault on that section of the walls, and I need to get my archers back, mainly just to give the enemy space so that they can actually advance moderately far onto the second tier, and then I can fire at them with my matchlock Ashigaru on the final tier. It looks like the Naginata Ashigaru on my outer tier have been eradicated. The enemy samurai are now just kind of wandering around killing survivors, but they're still taking fire from the matchlock Ashigaru on the wall behind them. And because the enemy are bunched together, they're taking quite heavy losses. If you look carefully, you can see little puffs of blood coming out of the enemy ranks, as gradually more and more of their men are being cut down by the heavy shot that's coming down from just above them at close range. The enemy are taking definitely non-negligible casualties. I believe by this point in the battle, the Ashigaru on the wall have already killed hundreds of enemy samurai, severely depleting their ranks. So excellent news on that front, but over here, it looks like things are going more badly. The enemy's huge numerical advantage is crushing the Oda resistance. They're probably about to make their way onto the second tier, so the effect of my sacrificial units is almost over. But you can see actually on the ramp up to the gate I still have a load more units, because I pushed a few more units out to hold them back from the gate, mainly just to allow my matchlock Ashigaru to get more kills there. So here the enemy have inevitably made their way onto the second tier, and as I said, I'm allowing them to just take some ground and bunch up so that the men up here on the wall can fire at them. Another unit of matchlock Ashigaru, which has a very nice line of sight on the enemy. But also, even if those men weren't there, just look how many Oda troops I have up here. The enemy will really struggle to break through this second tier. This is just because all of Nobuhide's army is now arranged right here, so we have such a large local numerical superiority. I don't really need to pull off any sort of fancy matchlock strategies to get rid of them, but the matchlocks are going to help. Now the enemy are putting more men into the battle. They had a whole load of men who they'd kept outside the castle, I believe because they were worried about me cavalry attacking them, but my cavalry actually died when they were attacked by the enemy's general units on the far south side of the map. Now the enemy are throwing everything into this attack. Nobunaga's forces sneaking around the castle. His idea is to come and actually attack the enemy's general on the south side. Meanwhile, the fight inside the castle is simply a grind at the moment, a grind that's going to go in my favour as my matchlocks continue to fire. This is impossible! Those weapons they have. A boom like thunder sounds the death of any man they pointed at. Those peasants are slaying the most veteran of samurai in the blink of an eye. Is this the new way of warfare? Is this dishonourable magic the new method of the Oda and the reason they still will not fall? How can my men fight with dignity when their lives are meaningless in the face of the enemy's cowardly tricks? I dare say that in the battles to come, we must fight fire with fire. And so, as the battle drags on, the enemy realise it's not going to go anywhere in their favour, and they start trying to escape. The men on the inner tier have no hope, they're already surrounded. The men on the outer tier are attempting their escape, running super fast as the enemy's of Oda tend to do these days. They're rushing out the gate, which is for some reason open. I don't know who left it open, but Nobunaga's forces are standing outside the gate where they were fighting with the enemy's general and staff. So they end up getting caught up in these long Yari Ashigaru who are just standing on the base of the gate. Some of them do manage to escape from the slaughter, and they rush quite foolhardily through Nobunaga's bodyguards and cavalry and into the huge mass of Oda troops on the bridge heading westward. So the enemy are trying to force their way through, but they're all going to be slaughtered. There's almost no hope for them anymore. It's a decisive victory for the Oda. The Amako forces were all but destroyed, and although the Oda had to sacrifice several regiments to achieve this, the matchlock Ashigaru between them killed around 1,000 of the enemy troops. Excellent work from the new gun-toting units. Let's have a look at the battle results screen to actually see what happened. It looks like the enemy lost around 4,000 men, the Oda losing around 1,700. Many of them, though, were garrison troops. So, in fact, the Oda's real losses will be a few hundred lower than that, perhaps around 1,200. Not too bad, really. We have defeated 2 Amako armies. Umi is safe again. We still haven't lost our very important province of Umi. Excellent news. So here's that Chosokabe invasion force we saw a bit earlier. It looks like it's a generic mix of samurai, only 1 unit of Ashigaru among all of them there. So they're a fairly competent army with 2 generals leading them. I have a whole bunch of Ashigaru in the castle at Owari ready to defend against them. And while looking, I also notice I have 2 monks. Now one thing I want to do with these monks is try and get rid of this ninja up in Wakasa, because he keeps sabotaging my farmlands. And this is the cause of the food shortage that the Oda are currently going through, which is severely damaging our economy and meaning it's harder for us to restore troops after battles. I also cheekily there managed to steal one of the enemy's Metsukeis, so we've got a new Metsuke. However, converting that enemy ninja failed, so he can continue to wreak havoc among our agricultural sector up in Wakasa. Bad news. Now let's see what's happening on the border of South and North Shinano. I'm moving Oda troops up to displace these tiny enemy armies. There's a few Yamanouchi and Uesugi forces just hanging around here, remnants from past defeats, and perhaps just reinforcements for the Yamanouchi main army at North Shinano. So I'm pushing away a few of these units to clear out the way towards North Shinano, because if I attack the castle with both armies, I could surely take it. However, it turned out that I actually don't have enough movement points to reach the castle this turn, so instead I'm putting both armies into hidden ambush positions to attack any new armies that try and attack South Shinano. Back in Umi, Nobuhide is leading his men west to slaughter the Amako survivors. I didn't want those surviving regiments to head back to the Amako lands and be reinforced or join any more Amako armies, so we defeated all of them, taking 0 losses. Can't have much of a better result than that. 2 more enemy armies defeated. With them out of the way, I'm going to have to resist the temptation to send Nobuhide's victorious army to besiege the capital. He's so near, he actually doesn't have enough movement points to do so. Instead, I'm going to put him in an ambush position on the road from Umi to Kyoto, so any more Amako forces coming along are going to face a nasty ambush if they want to reach Umi. So it looks like the Oda have pretty much dealt with the majority of the local threats. They've pushed their defences back out to the edge of their domain, so the crisis of a few turns ago where all the forces were fighting to defend Owari seems to be over. There is still an enemy army in Owari. What I'm going to do is stop them using the bridge to Mino, and then simply wait to see what new threats come the Oda's way, which we'll be seeing in the next Oda episode. That's all for this episode, but to see Takeda Shingen's bid to make himself Shogun, join me next time on The Eternal Law.